I'm Farhan Dalla, transformational trainer, and welcome to Elevate Your Life, a transformational podcast, an invitation to take the journey towards your deepest self. It is my intention to inspire you to connect, move, and meditate. We'll tap in, tune in, and dive in, and together learn and reflect from authentic, real, and transformative conversations. Let's get started. Disclaimer: the information in this episode is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you have a medical condition, please consult with a medical practitioner. Hi everyone, today my guest is Angela Orr. She is a transformational mentor, speaker, and pharmacist with over 40 years of experience in traditional healthcare. After navigating her own health challenges, including a breast cancer diagnosis and chronic stress, she began integrating science-backed practices with mind-body healing. Through her work with meditation, nervous system regulation, and identity transformation deeply rooted and influenced by Dr. Joe Dispenza's teachings, Angela has experienced profound personal change, including significant weight loss, improved energy, and a complete shift in how she approaches life and wellness. Today, she helps midlife women move from overwhelm and disconnection to clarity, emotional regulation, and empowered living by combining science, spirituality, and measurable transformation. Hi, Angela. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to share my story and to have a conversation with you.
Well, we have lots to unpack, and I really want to dive in because you've had quite a journey from, physical changes, a change in career. I'm wondering, let's get into the conversation in back when, you were running these pharmacies. On the surface, sounds like you were doing pretty well, successful, but what was going on in the inside? It sounds like there were issues with chronic stress. How did all of that show up in your body and in your life?
So we all have pivotal moments in our life. Here I was, a pharmacist. I owned 2 successful pharmacies. Things seemed to be well. I did a lot of advocacy for independent pharmacy legally. So I would go to legislature, go to meetings, I had a plethora of friends and living the life. And yet, underneath it all, I realized I was stressed and it was killing me. And that came about when I had a breast cancer diagnosis. So I was diagnosed with breast cancer about 12 years ago. And at that time, I was at the peak or pinnacle of my pharmacy ownership. And I just said, after evaluating that diagnosis, I just realized that life could never be the same again. And that I had to live a different life because although I loved what I did, I was so stressed that it turned up in my body as cancer. I was 367 pounds at the time, so I was significantly overweight. I also drank quite a bit, and I haven't done that now in 6 years, which I'm really proud of, as well as just always having that underlying feeling of unhappiness, even though I shouldn't be. And I was able to move through that breast cancer treatment. The surgeon told me that I was an uninteresting case. So I guess it was a good time to be boring. It
What
was
does that mean? You're an uninteresting case. I
it
mean, why
was
would a
very
medical
small.
practitioner use those words?
It's yes. Um, to me, that meant that it was small. Although it was cancer, it was small and very treatable. Um, And even though it wasn't like this, I don't know. I never have been asked that question, to be honest. And I've never thought about it in that terms. How I thought about it is in terms of, I'm going to be okay. And I knew it in my core, but it was a huge wake up call for me to really look at how I was living and how did I want to live.
Mhm. What were the recommendations from your doctors at that point in dealing with the cancer? Like, what
So
were
at
the
that
suggestions on how to treat it?
So what she said was, the surgeon as well as the oncologist, I went through a surgery, so I did have the lumps removed. It was clean margins, which means, no chemotherapy. And the radiation that I had at the time was experimental, but it was perfect. It was only 5 days, twice a day, so I didn't have to have whole breast, radiation, just internal. It's a whole process. It's, just mammocyte, so it was just right at where the cancer was.
Mhm,
So I was very fortunate in that my treatment, although it was cancer and it could have been so much worse, it was still simple compared to so many other people or so many other situations. However, what she did say is that the two risk factors that were known to cause breast cancer definitively, it's not the genes that you think about, it's not that. It was alcohol and obesity.
mhm,
And so that was my sign, as you will, or what I felt like God telling me, those are areas that you've struggled with and you need to
mhm,
really address. And then
mhm,
I thought about that and I thought, what what led me down the road where I am today is I can't just think about not doing them because I've tried that in the past. It
mhm,
has to be like, why do I do that? Or who am I being to be the person that did drink so much, that did overeat so much? And how can I how can I be a different person so that I don't have to live like this?
mhm. Um, we've heard of type A personalities, but there's been some studies to suggest that people who have a type C personality can be at risk for cancers. Are you familiar with type C personalities, and would you describe yourself as one?
So I heard the type A, I understand that, but what was the second one?
Type C.
No, I haven't. That is new for me.
Oh, so a type C person is someone who is a people pleaser in short term, someone who appeases others and is constantly putting the needs of others before themselves and putting their needs aside and never expressing dissatisfaction or anything that will sort of upset other people. They're generally people pleasers. And the association with that is when you're not expressing yourself and you're constantly putting other people's needs before your own, that according to the doctor who talked about this in her studies, Dr. Lydia Timoshuk, is that it increases your stress and suppresses your immune system. So there isn't like a direct correlation, but an indirect correlation with people who are type C personalities. Were
I
you
would
a people
absolutely
pleaser?
I would absolutely describe myself as type C. Absolutely. So that's very
Mhm.
interesting. I'm going to go and look that up after. When I was
I'll put the
diagnosed,
link for the study in the notes so people can look that
perfect.
up.
That would be great.
Mhm,
So when I was diagnosed and I had to sit down with my staff because I owned two pharmacies at the time, and I had to be honest with them because I was going to be going through to doctor's appointments, treatments, having more pharmacists fill in for me. I was more concerned about ensuring that they were okay and to let them know that I was gonna be fine than I was about I almost, like, dissociated myself from the cancer. So, it wasn't even about me and the cancer, it was about making sure that my staff was okay, and they knew that I would be okay, and that we would continue to function as a pharmacy. So,
mhm.
that, I think, kind of shows that I really did care about others, throughout my whole business, that's one of the things that I really did a lot is to consider others before myself, and that's not the way it is today.
Right. Well, I want to circle to that because I think it's important. It might have been probably a pivotal point of your healing is, you know, the shift towards making sure that you're taking care of yourself because it sounds like you weren't up until then. So at what point did you realize I got to take care of me first?
At that time. So, as I
Mhm,
said, when I that diagnosis, so I've had several shifts throughout my time here on Earth, where I've had big important, awareness has come to me. But this was one of the most profound ones, right? We all have times that shift us and rock our world. So when that happened, I just realized, as I said, that I felt like life could not really go on the way that it was. And the way that it was is that I worried about everything. Like I felt like I had the worry gene, that because my mother was born a worrier, my grandmother was born a worrier, and not warrior, worrier. And I took everything personal. And, even though I looked on the outside that I was doing all the right things, but in a way I didn't because of my significant weight, there's obviously some disconnect there. But what I realized at the time is that if I don't take care of myself, how can I take care of others? Because I won't be able to, due to illness, due to death, due to not being able to be there for others. So that really shifted that I literally could not continue to live the same life. Now, it's not like it changed overnight. It took me 6 years before I stopped drinking. It took me some time before I really started to take care of my physical body. But I just had come to a point where it was like, I need to find a different path. And I love healthcare. I believe that healthcare is very important. However, I also believe that that our healthcare is really sick care, that it takes care of sick people.
Mhm.
And I decided that I needed to be true healthcare is what can I do to not go into the sick care system? And then what
Mhm.
can I do to help others not go into the sick care system or get out of that if they do get into that? Now, again, as you said earlier, I never advocate for people to go off of medication. I never advocate for people to not do the established medical routine. I think you need to have a balance of both. And you need to work with your doctor if that's something that you're looking to do. I think that some of the things that I work with and I do now complement what we do in traditional healthcare, or sick care, as I call it.
And you and I both share that in common. We're both part of the traditional medical model system, in that I'm a physical therapist, a physiotherapist, you're a pharmacist. And I do believe, like you said, the two complement each other. But, given that you came from a history of being a pharmacist, what made you look outside of the traditional medical model of conventional medicine for your own treatment and healing?
So they so when I was treated, I did go the traditional route. I had the radiation, I had I had the surgery, I had the treatment. However, then they wanted me on a medication for 5 years afterwards. They give women a pill 5 years after. So I started to take it, but I really looked into it. And I looked into the potential side effects, as well as the pros and cons of it, the potential upside, the potential downside. And then when I was nearing the end of it, so I did talk to my doctor, and we ended up, I did not take it every day. I just took it so many times a week, and then I kind of cut down. And at the time, they wanted women to take her for 5 years. And then around the time that I was going to end, they said, no, it should be 10 years. And I was like, nope, that's not going to be me. And what I really studied and looked at is, how do those recommendations come up? How do they determine that? And it's really interesting, and not to get into, the medical model or medication and things, but I'm sure most of us have heard about the placebo effect and the studies. So the studies that are done on medications, you have people who don't get the medicine but think they are, and then people who get the medicine. And if certain criteria are met, the medication can be approved. And there was only like a couple of percent difference. So I was like, okay, so you want people to take this medicine, have potential significant side effects, and there's maybe a 1 to 2% difference.
Wow,
And
I
then
didn't know that.
mm. Same
That's
thing for now,
huge.
that's not every medicine. It depends
Right.
on what medicine. But if you take the biggest antidepressant out there, which I'm not going to name, the non-placebo group had a 2% difference.
That's
That's
a
significant.
huge takeaway message. And I don't think people are aware of that,
No.
which means that your body has the capacity to release its own natural pharmaceuticals to support your healing, which you could
Any
get out of a pill your body could produce.
any medication that is produced mimics a natural substance. Any medication that you take mimics a natural element that you have in your body. And what people, I think, don't always know is that they have an internal pharmacy. So you have all of those pharmaceutical compounds naturally in your body. You have, like you have a natural pain reliever that, endorphins are released. You have natural feel good chemicals, oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin. You have all of those natural substances in your body. But what happens is you get an imbalance in them. And when you get and that's also part of nervous system dysregulation, when you get that imbalance and those chemicals is when you become depleted in some areas, you get overproduction in other areas that may be harmful to you long term. And yes, outside substances can help you with that balance, but there's also ways to balance that naturally. And that's the path that I've decided to go on. So I like to say, and I believe, meditation is medication. Now, I use other things, not just meditation. I'm also a certified HeartMath practitioner. And for those of you who maybe you could include heartmath.org in the show notes, because there's a lot of resources. And for those who don't know what HeartMath is, it's an organization that has done almost 500 published studies to show that when you have a coherent heart, you can change your biology, physiology, and chemistry internally.
Can you can you explain what a coherent heart is for those that don't know?
Yes. So a coherent heart is, to just make it very simple, I could go off on hours on the science of this because I understand it and I know it. But a coherent heart is when your heart beats, you have a natural rhythm to it. So it's the timing of the beats. So it's not your heartbeat per se, and it's not your blood pressure, although it affects those areas, but it's the timing of the beat, which is your heart rate variability. So you don't want it to be the same between every single beat because then you'd be a flat line. So there's a natural rhythm, and the natural rhythm between the beats, so I'll use an example to explain it. So if you are in a fight or flight mode, something happens and you get upset, you can actually kind of feel your heart beating. So if you looked at it on a chart, it would be like all over the place, right?
Hmm.
But if you're in a calm, even a neutral state or a calm state or even a happy or joyful state, your rhythm is much more rhythmic and the timing between the beats is more consistent.
Okay, got it.
So a coherent heart is when you have that more natural rhythmic rhythm. And it's amazing how the things that can affect that. So the things that affect HRV, so a lot of people have heard about HRV, heart rate variability, and heart rate variability is actually also a marker of health and of longevity. So there's a lot of different devices out there that measure it. HeartMath has their own device, which is has much more technology in it and can be much more precise than, like, say, the Oura Ring or the Apple Watch or whatever. But what affects your heart rate variability is part of it is your epigenetics. And epigenetics is when your genes turn on or off. So if I get a little too deep here, I apologize, but I'll keep it as simple as possible. But when your genes turn on and off, because that's what drugs do. So the drugs that you take turn genes on or off to affect different processes in your body. And what affects and epi is the step before that. So epi is what happens before that then affects the genes turning on and off. So what affects epigenetics is toxins. So things that you take in, food, water, pollution, things, traumatic injury. Traumatic injury can affect your genes, right? But the biggest contributor to epigenetics is your thoughts, but it's actually your perception of your thoughts. So if you think something is really bad, what happens is then you turn on this whole cascade of chemicals in your body. And you can actually signal up to 1,500 different chemicals that can influence your body negatively. And when you do that over a sustained period of time, that is when it can hurt your body and cause disease. So we talk about often overproduction of cortisol, and we talk about how that overproduction of cortisol leads, that is believed to be 80 to 90% of doctors' visits in today's world. So when we were a caveman, we would run from the lion, our cortisol would go up, everything would be sent out to our limbs so that we could run away. Because you don't want to be digesting food. You don't want to think about procreation. You don't want to think about anything else but getting away, right? You get away. What used to happen is within an hour, say that a lion is chasing a zebra. Within an hour, that zebra can be back to resting state, eating the grass, digesting. It doesn't think about, oh, what am I going to do next time? Oh, what would have happened if he had gotten me? Oh my gosh, and ruminate about it. The zebra doesn't do that. So it goes back to resting state. And that's how we are. The problem is we don't go back to resting state because everything is the lion, our mother-in-law, our boss, the car next to us. So we keep this elevated stress response going all the time. It affects our epigenetics. We have this myriad of chemicals in our body that over time can cause inflammation and disease. With that being said, you think, well, I just need to control my thoughts. And we have this beautiful thing called the prefrontal cortex, which is the big part of our brain. We're the only species that has it. And it is where our thoughts come from. So to control that is a much more difficult task. And that's what we all struggle with.
Okay. All right. And
So I
so,
know that was a lot of information.
yeah, no worries. It was all really good information. I'm going to dissect a little bit of that as we go into some of the work that you've done outside of conventional medicine. And you talked about the surgeries, the radiation, and how now you started implementing things like HeartMath. But I'm also interested in learning more about how Dr. Cho's work influenced your healing and transformation. And for people who don't know, Dr. Joe Dispenza is a chiropractor, author, and lecturer, and is known for his work on mind-body healing, neuroscience, and personal transformation, blending quantum physics with ancient wisdom to teach people how to change their reality through meditation and changing beliefs. Stemming from his own recovery from a spinal injury, and Dr. Joe has retreats where he teaches this material, and I'll leave the link to his website so you could learn more about him. But tell me, Angela, how did Dr. Joe's teaching influence your healing? And like, how did you get introduced to his work?
It's interesting. I was thinking, so I've been studying Dr. Joe Dispenza for years. Seriously, probably the last 3 years. I did, during my recovery phase, watch or, you know, review a lot of different work from different teachers. And I've known about Dr. Joe Dispenza for a long time, much longer than the 3 years. But as I said, I got serious. And what I mean by serious is I started to read his books. I actually have hosted book clubs with teaching his books. I've been to several retreats of his. Um, what I loved about what he has to say is that transformation and changing your life is science-based. So he says a lot of things that other teachers that I've worked with or seen in the past or have studied their material, he says a lot of the similar concepts, but I feel like he says it so much differently, and he has the science to back it up. So he's done a lot of studies. He's done a lot of, he continues to do studies to put out there, because if transformation is science-based, it's replicatable. And that's what I love about it, at being a scientist myself. So when I started doing the work more seriously 3 years ago, what I mean by that is I read his books, but I also actually worked on implementing them in my life. It wasn't just a read and go, because that's what I found is the difference, is that you really have to take that different action, or you have to take different, you have to actually change something to change something. If nothing changes, nothing changes. So I have a multitude of his meditations that I do daily. I do different ones. And as I said, I've been to several retreats, as well as I love to watch his lectures online. I have several of his courses. So he has several courses online that are on demand, and I own 3 of them. And last year I went through the abundance course, which really made a huge difference for me. So his work, combined with what I'd done previous to really doing his work, I think helped propel me into the action, into really taking the steps necessary to make the changes that I want to make in my life.
When you started that journey, what intentions would you say you set for yourself? I mean, you have all this material. He's given you steps to take, what the meditations he teaches, the material in the books. But what intentions did you set for yourself?
So the intentions that I had for myself in the beginning are very different than today. The intentions that I had in the beginning were about more outward focused, about having um, a certain amount of money in my business, a certain amount of weight on me, and I still have those intentions. But now my intention is a little bit different, in that those are going to be I feel like those will be a reflection of who I become. So my intentions today is to have that internal freedom and to not be in my head all the time. And through his work, I also found HeartMath, which has been a lifesaver for me. And I do quite, as I said, I'm HeartMath certified practitioner, and I work with that very closely. But he works with HeartMath also, because a lot of his work is about having a coherent heart and a coherent brain.
Mhm. And Dr. Joe often talks about in order to change, we need to change our belief systems. Throughout your work in immersing yourself, in his teachings, what belief systems would you say you had to let go of, and what did you replace them with?
There are so many, because it's interesting. You have certain beliefs and you continue to uncover. So I feel like I used to think, okay, I'll do this and then I'll be better. or I'll get to where I want to go. And I realize it's a journey and there's always going to be something that comes up. And now I look at opportunities to overcome limiting beliefs as, when something happens, I'm like, oh, this is a beautiful opportunity to overcome myself again rather than, uh, you know. So some of the examples of some beliefs is I'm not worthy. I
Right.
think many of us feel that way. And I still have that sometimes, is something that I'm not completely over, but I think that I'm over most of it. And now it comes up in other ways at times. Not good enough. The other belief system is it'll work for her, but not for me. The other beliefs is that I was a victim. I feel like a lot of my life, like it was never my fault. It was my growing up. I mean, I grew up with a alcoholic father, prescription addicted mother, but they did the best they can. So I have nothing but absolute gratitude for them. At one point, it was like, it was terrible. They were awful. And that's what's holding me back in life. So really just taking complete responsibility for myself, because if I place the blame or I play the victim because it's somebody else's fault, it leaves me no power because I can't change it because I can't change them. So taking complete responsibility for all of that was a shift in belief, because if I can do that, then I can change. I can change it. Another belief system would be that I was born this way. Like I said, I was born a warrior. And I realize now, no, I was conditioned. So many things that you think you're born with, you're not. You're just conditioned into those thoughts and patterns, because a belief, as we know, working with Dr. Joe's work, a belief, but for those of you who may not know, a belief is just a thought that you've had over and over and over again to the point where you believe it in your subconscious. And it's more than just that. It's those you have networks in your brain of different ideas. And when you think about it over and over again, you strengthen those networks. And when you start to change those beliefs, you loosen up those networks. So then you can form new neural networks of thoughts that you do want to believe.
Mhm. How did healing show up for you in your body from chronic stress? Like, what did that feel like? And I guess not just in your body, but in your mind as well, because it all, starts in our minds. But how did healing show up in your mind and in your body? What did that feel like?
It felt awful. So the chronic stress in my mind, and it's interesting because if you would have asked me 12 years ago, 13 years ago, when this first started, I didn't think about it. And I think most people don't. You just assume that that's the way that you're going to feel. And for me, the stress felt like a tension. Like there was always a tension in my body. There was, and for myself, what I tried to do to get rid of that tension is I drank too much and I ate too much to try to feel that. So to try to fill a void, that because I felt like there was something missing, that there's some kind of void there, and that would lead to a feeling of emptiness inside. It also showed up for me as, oh, I didn't want to move my body. Like I didn't want to, the thought of going to the gym, the thought of walking long distances, the thought of going anywhere, I just didn't want to do, because it was like so hard because I was so overweight, but also just because I was so stressed. Like I didn't want to do any of that. I wanted to stay safe and just stay within a small amount of, I owned a pharmacy, but I wanted to like just go there or home. I did go out with people and stuff, but only if, there was alcohol there. And so it showed up in a lot of different ways like that. And in my mind, how it showed up was just these negative thoughts that I would think over and over again and ruminate about, even though everything looked good on paper, you know, and it really showed up ev- at times as my journey went on. Like, I had so much joint pain. I had a left ankle issue and a right knee, and I could hardly walk at one point when I was really stressed. And I ended up in the ER one night to get some help because I was like, I can't walk. And I literally, now that I think about it going back, is that that was stress in my body. Like, that
Hmm.
literally was stress. And I can trace it back to the overproduction of cortisol that I had because of the way that I thought. And now, I mean, like, that's so significant, to be honest, like, that kinda hit me even strong right now.
Okay.
It's interesting how things can, affect you even years later. But and Dr. Joe talks about this, and it's so true. If we only knew how powerful our thoughts were, we would we would be so mindful of what we allow ourselves to think and not think. So stress to me ended up being just this, way of feeling that was I was used to it, but it wasn't natural.
Right. And Dr. Joe says your thoughts can make you sick, but your thoughts can make you well. So
Yes.
having said that, with the version of you now, how do you feel, and how would you describe the body that you're in now and the mind that you're in now, having gone through the healing journey? And obviously, it's a work in progress for all of us. There's many layers, but for where you are now, you've lost a significant amount of weight and all that. Like, how do you feel in this version of your body?
I love it. Um, Sometimes I wish I were further ahead than I am, and I'm like, "You know what? It's okay. It is what it is," because I feel like I'm reverse aging. I'm gonna be 65 this year, and I am training to do a 5K run.
Fantastic.
Not walk, run. Yes, and, synchronicities happen. I had decided, okay, what can I do to get out of my comfort zone to continue my work with my body? Because I go to the pool generally 4 to 5 times a week now in the morning to go to the pool and work out in the pool. And I'm like, but I've got to up it. I've been doing that for months now. I'm part of the 5 a.m. club, not the PM club.
Me
So
too.
I'm there at 5 a.m. with my little cohort of other people who are there at 5. And so this gym is a physical therapy place also, but they have a heated pool and you can go in the pool and do exercises anyway. So I'm like, I could do something different. So I said, I know I'm going to run a 5K, not walk, run. And then I'm at a grocery store in town. I see this woman that I know. Now, this is 2 weeks ago, who I had not seen in a while, but she's a personal trainer and I've trained with her in the past. And I was telling her, she's like, God, you look great because I've lost, a bit of weight. And
A bit, 100
uh,
pounds.
yeah, well, 120. Yeah.
Okay.
Since the highest, 140 actually. But anyway, yeah. And I have more to go, but since the 367 I'm talking about. So I was telling her my goal and she's like, really? I am starting a walk to run class in 2 weeks. I'm like, yay. No, I don't want to. No. Okay, I'll join. No, because your body fights you. Even
Sure.
after doing all of this, your body is still like, no, no. But I'm
That
like,
little
okay,
voice of
I'm
doubt.
joining.
Yeah.
So synchronicities, right? That just happened.
Right.
And so she's going to let me know. How I feel about my body now is that I would have never, ever, 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 ever even considered that. So I've done 5Ks in the past, but I walked. One of them, I was like the very last one out of, and they had thousands of people. But I did it because that's how I am. When I say I'm going to do something, like really commit to it, I do. And I think what I realize now is that I'm a spirit in a body, but my body is really what God has given me here on earth. And I want to take better care of it. But that's because I'm a different person. I'm not the person that thinks about, well, I don't want to not eat that or I don't want to do this. It's like, no, I want to take care of this vessel that I have. And I want to make the most out of life and have fun.
I love that.
So I really enjoy my body because without it, I couldn't go do all that stuff. And I do a lot of somatic work. I do a lot of different things because, when your nervous system is dysregulated, and to me, a nervous system dysregulation is really just when your autonomic nervous system is out of balance. And that's what
Mhm.
heart coherence is also, is just when, you're out of balance with that, and what can we do to balance it? And that was what I talked about a little earlier with really trying to control that overproduction of cortisol over a long period of time.
Right.
That to me is the work that we are here, are here to do.
How would you say your life has changed since you've healed from chronic stress and from cancer?
It has changed in so many ways that some of it is subtle, but some of it is very overt. So the biggest thing would be physically, I've changed that, but also is about really really walking the talk. I had a home fire in November of 24, and it was a grease fire. I was on my way home from work. My husband was cooking it. Long story. We didn't lose our home, but we had to be out for 8 months. And before I would have done this, that would have been a S show. It would have not been pretty. First and foremost, I would have blamed him, and I would have been really mad at him, and I didn't. Maybe there were times, but he felt so guilty anyway. But it wasn't because it was because of, like, I just realized, like, I had to let go of any of that. That was not gonna those kind of thoughts do not serve me, and they're not true. Life means nothing. Nothing means nothing until we assign it meaning. So when I assign a meaning to something, which again is a big shift in my life, that's when the good or bad thoughts can come in. So the meaning I put to that whole situation is something that happened. And maybe in a weird way, I manifested it because we were slowly redoing our house, and I got a whole new interior. I'm obsessed with my floors. I love my new kitchen. It's like, wow, look at all this stuff that I manifested. It's beautiful. I love it.
Right.
And that would have never been the case previously. It would have been more about worry. We had trouble with the insurance, with the contractors, with my husband trying to do it. You have stuff that happens, right?
Mhm.
But you just deal with it and move on. And so that's to me. So, and I used the tools that I had, whether it was meditation, whether it was heart centering at a time when I was really stressed, doing my HeartMath breath work, um, which can make a difference in 1 minute. Like in a minute, you can change your state. So using them, knowing that is one thing, but then to use them. And I tend to, and I do that in most cases. And so I feel like that's part of what's really changed for me, is just witnessing how I was as a person during that time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds like you've changed the way you see yourself and the way you see the world, right?
Yes,
And you
absolutely.
and you get to decide what meaning you attach to that with your thoughts. Just to use your own words,
Yes,
right?
yes.
What would you say has been the greatest gift from this healing journey? What has been the message for you?
The greatest gift was the cancer itself because it made me stop and think.
Mhm.
You hear that people talk about that and you're like, okay, right, whatever. But it is true. And I think what I've taken away, the biggest lesson that I've taken away from this whole journey, because not, I mean, but even before the cancer, I've had some significant things, happen in my life that I was able to overcome. And then with the fire and everything, the greatest gift that I can say is that I'm so grateful for the gift of life every day. And there was not a time always that I felt that way. I used to be very angry when I was younger. And, but just to really, it's a journey, it's a journey. The destination is returning home when we die. And I'm not afraid to die, and I can't wait to die, to be honest. And I don't think I'm going to die. I've decided I'm not dying till I'm 100 because I have too much to do in this world. But I have no fear about death, no fear, because I know where I'm going. And Jesus on Sunday, for those who believe, thank you. And for those you who don't, I don't mean to offend, but we all have our own beliefs. But that helps anchor me in to knowing that I've got to enjoy this journey. And instead of tiptoeing through life and arriving at the grave, like with regrets, I want to go to the grave with, man, that was a great ride.
So much of your life has transformed, in this journey, your mind, your body, and even your career.
Yes.
You're now a coach supporting middle-aged women. I want to dive into that a little bit. And can you share, what does a coaching session with you look like? And who is your typical client?
So that has shifted over time for me, because of my growth, I think. And I do work with midlife women, and I also work with a lot of entrepreneurs because entrepreneurship can be very difficult and very stressful and dysregulate your nervous system. Um, so I have different types of coaching or mentoring that I do. And actually I'm also an author. I don't know if you knew that, but I'm a 4-time author. I've been in 4 books, and 3 of them have been best-selling in several categories. So I really see myself eventually um, speaking and doing keynote speaks, as doing keynote sessions, as well as other types of speaking engagements. Currently, with who I work with, which, as I said, would be midlife women, because I find myself there. And so I identify, as well as entrepreneurs. I've owned 2 8-figure business. I had 2 pharmacies that were 8 figures before I sold them. But what a typical session would look like would be, so it would depend on where I have a process now that I kind of take people through. So I really believe to manifest or create the life of your dreams, there's steps that you have to take to get there. So you have steps that you have to take to get there. And it really is all about, it's hard to create your life or to manifest really what you want when you are completely dysregulated, when you're in that fight or flight all the time. So we go through first to really give you tools and have you implement and begin to shift that balance, get yourself in to be able to really regulate yourself. I talk about nervous system sovereignty, which is
Hmm.
really about the ability to internally shift that command, um, to have more of that balance. And then we go into, what do you want? Most people can tell you what they don't want, but it's hard for them to tell you what they want. So we do that, and then we shift into, who do you need to be that person? And then the biggest key is, then what actions do you need to take to get there? But it's not actions of to-do list. It's more about aligned action. So it's not inspired action, because I find inspiration sometimes can only go so far, but it has to be aligned with who you are and what you want to be. So a typical session, there are no typical ones, but it could be, depending on the topic, where we talk about those different areas in relationship to that person, and and I have a pretty good ability to kind of see through some of the blocks or the areas that need shifting, and to help guide women to see that for themselves.
Excellent. You mentioned nervous system sovereignty. Can you briefly explain what it means and why is it so important for long-term change?
You I believe that long-term permanent changes or transformation cannot be done if you have a dysregulated nervous system. So dysregulated nervous system, there's the autonomic nervous system, which encompasses the parasympathetic and sympathetic. And as we know, and I'm not going to go into that, that's not the time or place here, but what happens is when we have an imbalance of that is when those stress chemicals can really run rampant in your body. You're never going to get rid of the stress response, and you don't want to, but what you want is, if you go into that, to come back to a place of neutrality faster. So I don't advocate you can go from angry to happy. That's not the goal, but you can go from angry to neutral. And neutrality is way underrated. So I believe that nervous system sovereignty is that when you can self-regulate, and you have that, you continue to build that emotional intelligence. Because as you continue to build emotional intelligence, you can come off course, but come back quicker and come back quicker. When you do that, I feel like that's when you take your power back. You hear people say, take your power back. Well, what does that mean? When you're dysregulated, if you think about it, in the example I gave, all your energy is going out in stress. So you're spending all your energy in stress, all
You're
your
in survival.
resources. Yeah, your survival. You're
Totally in
You're trying to
survival.
survive.
Yeah.
So everything's going out to the limbs because you're trying to fight or flight or fawn or freeze or whatever. But when you can regulate that system, and you can do that at will, that's sovereignty, but you take your power back. So you take that energy back, and it comes into your body, like your midsection. And that's where you can open your heart. That's when you can have digestion. That's when you can have repair, regrowth. And that's when you have creativity, because you can't have creativity when you're fight or flight. Now, whether that's creativity in, your business or in life or whatever it is, and whatever you're creating, because we're here to create. We're hardwired for growth, but we're soft wired for comfort. And when you get that, um, when you're have an imbalance in that, is when you feel a lot of angst,
Mhm.
I believe.
Right. In my physiotherapy practice, virtually everyone comes in a state of fight or flight. And the minute I look at their breathing pattern, I can see a very, chest or apical breathing pattern, and they're not using their diaphragm. And often they don't even know how to breathe
They don't know.
properly. They don't. And so, in order for me to get a healing response, I got to teach them how to breathe first. And like, what do you mean my knee pain is associated with like my breathing pattern? Well, we're not going to be able to get you to heal if you're in fight or flight. And so that's often the first thing that I'm teaching. And it's in the last 5 or 6 years, it's been, I'd say 4 years, sorry, it's been a huge focus of my practice because there's been such a shift. So many people are dysregulated, and so many people don't know the tools or what to do. So I was wondering if you could give us a simple or practical way, that we can begin regulating our nervous system and shifting our state, today. Like, what's a simple way we can do that?
So and I agree. So with 100% with what you said. Sometimes people don't even breathe and they don't know. Like they hold their breath and then they'll breathe and then they'll. So one of the simplest, best ways is a HeartMath practice. It's a very simple technique. And I'm going to ask people to just do this with me as rather than just explain it, I'm going to take you through a small experience. It's a minute. So
If it
I
is
ask
safe to
people,
do so. So if you're driving right now, do this later when you're in a safe space.
absolutely. So I ask people to sit back and relax, to close their eyes if they feel comfortable, and to breathe in and out through their nose at a slower than normal pace. So it can be 5 in, 6 out, whatever's comfortable for you. a normal rhythmic breath. It does not have to be a complete inhalation, exhalation. Slower than normal. That extra second at the end helps to trip the vagus nerve to help in regulation. And as you breathe in 5, breathe out 6, I'm going to ask you to feel the breath going through your heart area. If you're in a space that you can do it, you can put your left hand. I put my left hand on my heart. This is just a me thing. It reminds me. So I'm not asking you to visualize this. I'm asking you to feel this. And thoughts may come, and that's okay. Don't fight them. Don't try to get rid of them. Just come back to the breath. And as you're doing this, think about somebody in your world that you love or care for. And think about them in a way of compassion, generate a feeling of compassion or love, empathy, whatever it is that they're in their life right now. And as you think of that person and that love, you've generated that feeling of love or empathy for them or compassion. Just radiate that feeling out to them. Think of them in your mind and continue to breathe in and out slower than normal through the heart area. And let's take a couple more breaths. And when you're ready, you can open up your eyes. And
Okay.
that, I don't, I'm sorry, go ahead. How did
No,
that
go ahead.
feel?
I totally felt that. I mean, I think putting my hand on my heart makes a big difference
It
for
makes a
me.
huge
And
difference.
yeah, I would say that's an important part of getting to that state and feeling the emotions while your hand is on your heart. As I often do with when I'm doing even an exercise of gratitude, oftentimes my hand is on my heart. So,
Hmm.
mhm,
And radiating that out to others helps you to get out of your head
mhm,
and out of yourself. It helps to really place other people in your life that are important. So HeartMath has shown, and I don't want people to mistake simple for not effective. Simple or easy can be profound. And doing this for 3 minutes, you can actually have a physiological change for 6 hours,
really.
really.
Okay.
Doing that for 15 minutes a day continuously, and the 15 minutes don't have to be contiguous. So 5, 5, 5, whatever, you know, has been shown to increase that emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
It's just a very simple, easy breath work that I love, that I try to practice actually all the time. So I still work part-time as a pharmacist.
Mhm.
So when I'm at the pharmacy and it's really chaotic, I will take 1 minute just to do that. And nobody has to know what I'm doing.
Mhm.
They don't have to know. You can just do it, and it can really shift your state and give you so much energy just in a minute.
Yeah, you could do this on a break, excuse yourself, go to the washroom, take some deep breaths, focus on the
Yep.
feeling. I
Yep.
love the component on sending that feeling of compassion and love to a person and how that helps you get out of your head. Um, and it also, you know, I want to say improves the efficiency and the efficacy of that breath work. Because oftentimes when I'm teaching breath work, it's just focusing on breathing properly in a position that works for you to make sure that you're activating your diaphragm. Angela, I want to say many people struggle with knowing what to do, um, and not following through. You know, what what do you see as the missing link?
It's not discipline. It is in a way, but it's not, I believe. I believe that we have an outdated identity because we still haven't regulated our nervous system. When you go to a restaurant and you're thinking about becoming a vegetarian, you may be torn about whether to order something that has meat in it or not because she's like, well, I don't know if I'm really. And I know this is a simple example, but if you had an identity, I'm a vegetarian, like, and no matter what, you would not even have a question about ordering non-meat items. When I quit drinking, I had something significant happen. And it was right after, it was during the COVID time, the C time. And because it was February of 2020. And I had been a very heavy drinker. Like, I considered myself actually a functional alcoholic. I drank every day, like not one, but maybe 2 bottles of wine. I mean, I drank a lot. And I had had a dry January in February, and then in February, one weekend, I had one drink, and I didn't even like it. I was like, and I just said in my mind, and then like I said, something happened, um, where it was like, I am not a drinker. I am not a drinker. That is just not who I am. And I used to think you couldn't have fun in life. Like, it'd be boring, all this stuff about alcohol. And I just made one of those decisions that was so profound, it changed the core of who I was in regards to that. And what I did is I had regulated myself enough of around this subject that I was like, that is not who I am. And to this day, I don't even think about having to drink. There's no temptation. Um, because your body seeks something that's familiar. And that familiar thing is that familiar feeling of having the drink or being that person. And so we kind of start, stop, repeat, but when we can regulate ourselves around that decision and then make that decision about who I am, I think the discipline comes much easier. I'm going to be a 5K runner. Not just this one time. Like, I'm going to be that woman who's 80, who runs multiple 5Ks, maybe even a marathon once in a while. I don't want to be a marathon runner. I already know that. I don't want to be a marathon, but I want to be a 5K runner, right? There's so many of them. Oh my God. I was looking at like some choices at the time of year because I'll be 65 in September, and that's when I want to run my first 5K. But I'm deciding I'm going to be a 5K runner. Like, that's just who I am. I'm going to be 80 and I'm going to be doing multiple ones all the time. And that to me is what helps me and what I've seen works as far as to make a decision about something, regulate that nervous system, make those changes in your mind. And it's so much more natural because to me, that's the aligned action. Because the aligned action versus I'm inspired, I'm going to go running today. No, not really. Because my body would say, no, I don't want to. But when you're aligned with who you are, like truly aligned, then it's easier to make that decision to go. I almost like I'm tricking myself into believing that I'm an Olympian. And an Olympian would never miss their workout, right? Because they're going to
Right.
be a gold winner.
Oh yeah, I've
Well,
worked with
I'm going to
many.
be a gold. Huh?
I've worked with many. They're very disciplined. Yes.
Very. right? Because that's their identity.
And their mindset, right? It's about living the life of, an athlete. And you could adopt that mindset, whether you're an Olympian or not.
Yes, yes, it's that mindset and it's that identity of who you are. Like, that is who you are at the core. So another example would be when I opened my pharmacy. I was, you know, who am I to open up my own pharmacy? I got in my head, I had blinders on. I didn't care what anybody said, what anybody thought. I was opening up my own pharmacy. And this is like back in 2007. And, I'm somebody, I grew up in a project. I mean, I could tell you stories about myself. I grew up in a project. I was the very first one who ever graduated college in my extended family. Like, who was I to do this? But I decided I am a pharmacy owner because I wanted to make a difference for people. And that propelled me to take the actions that I needed to take to be able to do that versus even when I didn't feel like it, I did it because I'm somebody who I do it anyway. I love that mantra. I do it anyway.
So that's fantastic. Angela, as we wrap up, there may be someone listening today who's on a healing journey or not, but stress, whether it's chronic or to a certain degree, impacts us every day. What message or final thoughts would you have to anyone to help them improve their state of being, the way they live their life, in order to help address their stress?
So I think awareness is the first key to, we have a unique ability as humans to have metacognition, to think about what we think about. Many people don't. That's why they binge watch Netflix or do this or do that because that way they don't have to think. But if there's somebody who like knows that they're not in the place that they want to be and they want to change, is to first stop and gain that awareness. I think the other thing is to find there's so many different things out there. The world has a lot of information, but I would say just research, like, how can you get regulated? How can you decrease anxiety naturally? What are some things? I would definitely say follow Dr. Joe Dispenza, read his books, join some of his communities that are all over the place that are free. If you can, it is a little bit expensive, but it's so worth it to go to a retreat. But before you do any of that, just even read his book. Go on YouTube and watch his channel. Look at the videos of transformation, the videos
Mhm.
that show the success stories of people. Watch his teachings. So that would be a great place to start. Look at HeartMath. You can follow me. You can, find somebody that really resonates with you to follow. I'm always putting out things that can help people to I do a twice a week newsletter and I try to always include some kind of simple technique that you can do to help right here in the moment.
Mhm.
Because it's not about changing your life overnight. So I would say, what can you find to help you find relief right here, right now? And then in the next moment, and then in the next moment, and then in the next moment.
Mhm.
And
And
as
it
you
doesn't have to
build
be
that,
complex, right? Like that breath work that you showed us, we just did that for about maybe a minute, and there was like a huge change in our energies, right?
yes, absolutely. It's just what can you do right here and now?
Mhm. Amazing.
And do that
Angela,
breath work.
do that breath
I would
work.
recommend
Yes.
doing that all the time.
Yeah, I do breath work every day. The one Dr. Joe teaches us, but I'll definitely incorporate the one that you taught us. It was so easy to do. And in that few minutes, I felt a difference and knowing that it's going to have, an impact on my nervous system for the next few hours. It's worth investing time throughout my day and adding that 1 or 2 minutes in cumulatively to whatever I can between my patients, because I know it can get stressful sometimes, much like at your pharmacy, at my
Yes.
clinic as well. And I'm in an environment where I'm dealing with people's pain
Uh,
It can get quite dense sometimes, so making sure that I take care of myself is important, as it is
yes.
for everyone. And I want to thank you so much, Angela, being a light, for being a light that you are, and sharing your knowledge and your gifts and making a difference in the lives of others. I will have the link to your website so people can learn more about you, as well as to your social medias so that people can follow you. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I love this community for the way everyone is giving back to others, and you are doing just that. Thank you, Angela. I am sending you my highest love.
I am so grateful to be here and to share my message. And thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very grateful.
You're welcome.
I'm Farhan Dalla. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's episode of Elevate Your Life, a transformational podcast. I hope today's conversation has elevated you in some way and inspired you to connect, move, and meditate. I'd really appreciate your support by following and rating this podcast. Come back soon and join me for another transformative conversation.